hello. How do you do? And welcome. Greetings. Hello, Scott in Toronto. Hello, Maurizio. Hello, Sally Pring, Robert Tyree, Carlos and Veronica in Cancun, perhaps. Adrienne, hello. Very nice. Mike, Matthew, hello. Aman, very good that we're connected again. Georgina, Yusuf, Henk, thank you for joining. Rojan, thank you too. I'm following up on your texts a lot. Hello, Polly, Carl Taylor, Chris Langdon, Holly Wheeler. Marianne, how do you do? Just greetings to all of you. And I've got quite a lot to report. It's been, for me, a little bit of a busy period. And I'd quite like to take you into my confidence and share with you some of the issues that we are working through. And now, to Sally, thank you for coming and doing our illustration. I'm going to try to be quite specific today on the issues that are of concern to me, and I'd love very much to hear from all of you. So, Twee, welcome. I know where you are. I think you're not far from me at the moment. It's nice that we're together. Would you like just to say hello to everybody and just share the video, the poll quickly? And then I'm going to go straight into today's report. And then I'm going to invite people to comment. Over to you, Twee.
Thank you. All right, so I will be launching the poll now. For those of you who haven't participated before, this is just a way for us to get to know you and who's joining us. So the first question is, where are you joining from? Once you've answered that, you can scroll down and answer your age range. And then the last question there is number 3, is how you're feeling today. The last question there is multiple choice, so please select, I suggest select up to 3 emotions that you're feeling. The positive ones are up the top and the more negative emotions are along the bottom. I'm going to leave that open and we can come back later and have a look at the results, but they are anonymous. Thank you, and back to you, David.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Hello. What I want to do is just to tell you a bit what's happening around the world and where the COVID is being transmitted and also some of the challenges faced. I mean, it's very interesting that those of you who've been looking at the news will see that the World Health Organization is reporting that it's getting more notifications of COVID each day right now than ever before. The current distribution of the reported cases has really picked up in Europe. During the last 5 weeks, there have been great increases in the numbers of people reported from throughout Europe, but particularly from countries in West and Eastern Europe, Ukraine, for example, as well as France. So it's been a big increase in the numbers of cases. And yet there's been quite a sense that perhaps there's a lot of people getting the virus, but not so many getting ill. And for about 3 weeks, there was a lot of questioning, well, how come we've got cases going up very fast, really, but the numbers of deaths has not gone up? Well, what's happened is that really we are beginning to see sickness and death levels rising. There's been a bit of a lag, but if we go to look at hospitals in Paris, their intensive care wards are full. If we look at hospitals in Madrid, they're full. And also we're seeing that the beginnings of an increase in the numbers of cases and even deaths are being reported from the UK. Canada is reporting more cases in some parts of the country. And similarly, of course, in some states in the Midwest of the United States. I think from my perspective, when I'm responding to questions from people who ask my opinion, I'm saying the virus hasn't gone away. it's very much here. The virus hasn't weakened, but it may be that it's affecting different people more. And my suggestion to everybody is to continue to take this virus really seriously and to continue to see it as a major threat, to continue to do everything possible to avoid individuals being infected, but also to avoid infection reaching other people. Of course, there's a lot going on that suggests that the world is better able to deal with this virus. We have a much better understanding of what individuals should do to avoid being caught by it. We've got a much better understanding of what government services need to do. We've got a much better understanding of how different parts of the system should be organized. In these discussions that we've been having, I've said many times that as far as I'm concerned, we do have to work hard to get ahead of this virus and then to hold it at bay. And I've suggested that as well as doing a lot of things ourselves to keep ourselves free of infection, we also need to organize services in a particular way, especially at local level. And then I've said that I don't think lockdowns should be the primary means of reducing the risks associated with this virus. I said it on Thursday. I think I may have mentioned it on Friday to some of you. I said it on Thursday in a program called Spectator Television. I was quite strong on it because actually I think this is a really, really important issue. I've seen so much evidence around the world, especially now that more than half the world's population was in lockdown for more than 6 weeks of this year. I've seen that poverty has greatly increased and that some people have lost whatever opportunity they had for income and have also found it really hard to keep their families with adequate resources. They've had difficulty accessing food for themselves, the other adults in their families, and for their children. Levels of malnutrition and hunger are on the increase. And really, the results of this are actually very serious indeed. We just have got, I believe, a doubling of world poverty that's occurred in the last 3 months. So I've been saying quite publicly now, we need to be able to learn to get ahead of this virus without introducing widespread lockdowns. And it's created a bit of a stink, particularly following Saturday when I was interviewed by a British newspaper, and my remarks about why I believe we need to avoid lockdown were treated with surprise in some quarters. Even yesterday at a rally in Florida, the commander-in-chief of the United States said, hey, I was right. WHO is now saying that lockdowns are wrong. WHO has changed its position. Over the weekend, there was an article that said WHO has done a backflip. And there was another article yesterday from an American newspaper saying WHO has done a U-turn. So most of today, I've been spent myself thinking through, well, how on earth could me saying that I'd rather that people were dealing with this virus without lockdowns have provoked this sense of, U-turn. And those of you who've been on these know that this is not a U-turn, this is a position that we've maintained constantly, that humanity has to learn to live with the virus as a constant threat, and there are techniques for doing so. Techniques that come out of the playbook of controlling all dangerous infectious diseases. You find people with the disease. You isolate them immediately. And then you find those with whom they've been in touch recently, and you isolate them as well. You give them treatment if you possibly can. You protect those who you know are particularly vulnerable. But through the process of case detection and isolation and contact tracing and isolation, you suppress the outbreak, and then life can go on. And I mentioned before that my colleague Chikwe in Nigeria has done this with 7 major dangerous infectious diseases in Nigeria during 2019. And he said doing it with COVID, straightforward, just use the same process. And that's what I mean when I say we ought to be able to deal with this virus without having to go into lockdowns. Instead, we should put in place the time and tested approach in infectious disease control of detection and isolation and contact tracing and isolation. So I'm having to do some pretty careful media work today, because I don't very often get referred to, not just in the tweet by the #1 in the US, but then in a New York Times fact-checking article, which said, well, actually, David Nabarro was not saying lockdowns are no good because he thought we should just go ahead and live with this virus and not worry about it. No, he was saying it because he believes, as do his colleagues who are working in WHO, that there's a better way of doing it. And that's what's happening in Senegal. And that's what's happening in much of East Asia. And that's what's happening in some European countries. And that's what's happening in parts of Canada. So it's been a bit of a difficult period, and it's getting worse. And I suppose that the really important point I want to make to you, if you've seen any of this stuff on social media or in broadcast media, is I'm not wanting to pander to those who say, just let go, let the virus go anywhere, it doesn't matter. I think they're wrong. People who say that you can rely on herd immunity as a way to reduce suffering, I think that's wrong. I mean, in the end, it may be that approach will be used in some places, but that would be by accident, not by strategic intent. And so let me just rehearse for you why I'm against the herd immunity argument. #1, I don't believe COVID is as harmless as many are making it out to be for the majority of people. Yes, I know that there are a lot of people who do recover after they've had the virus, but I also know that for many of these, the recovery is long, horrible, and difficult to navigate. So I'm saying I don't want anybody to have to go through that long COVID ordeal. I'm not sure that people who've had COVID will be immune against getting it again. We've had another instance of a person who's had it twice reported in the last 24 hours, including a death on a person who had it confirmed on 2 occasions. So I can't say to anybody with certainty that this gives you immunity if you've had it once. And I don't think it's reasonable to ask vast sections of the population to be shielded because they're at risk, as though somehow their existence is inconvenient. So I'm not in support of the group that has campaigned to let the virus go anywhere and rely on herd immunity to protect us against it. So I don't want lockdown. I don't want the let it go anywhere herd immunity. I want the middle path. The middle path that relies on people making choices to reduce their risk, that relies on authorities setting up systems that enable well-integrated local response based on testing, tracing, and isolating. I do want to encourage integrated action, bringing together private sector, public sector, and then community organizations and scientists, and then religious groups and sports organizations at the local level to deal with the issue locally, because I think that's the way for the future. And I'm setting this out as clearly as I can myself, but so are my colleagues in WHO. Just before this call, Maria Van Kerkhove rang me and said, "We're in this together, David. It's bizarre that when we try to explain what we're trying to do, when we're trying to explain how we're trying to help people to reduce suffering as a result of this virus, we get tangled up in this kind of peculiar political debate that's going on, when really what we're trying to do is to help the world come to terms with this threat." So with Twee, with John, with Catherine, with others on this call, with our friends in the WHO, our friends in the public health community, we are doing everything we possibly can to get the narrative right, to move towards a situation where people are empowered to help themselves get ahead of this virus and systems support them to do so. And we're going to go on doing this because we know that this challenge is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. So that's just my brief account of what's been going on. I'd love it to hear from any of you who've been struggling with the narrative. I'd love it to hear examples from you of where communities have been able to organize to defend themselves against the virus. I'd love to hear from you examples of where groups have come together to support each other through long COVID. I want short accounts of what you're doing, because I'm trying to build up a great repository of experience and ideas, because I think we're going to be needing to make our point more and more strongly in the media, in the European media particularly, as the numbers of cases build up so fast in Europe, and as countries are really scared and they don't know what to do next. And we need to help them to recognize that this needs a concerted infectious diseases response with all the different pieces that matter. And if the European nations can learn that, then they'll be able to get ahead of this. But it's not going to happen if there's just a slugging match between the herd immunity people and the lockdown people, and they just spend their time in a constant and energy sapping debate. So now, Scott Knox, I think I'm going to let you say it, because the point you've raised is the tough one, and it's the one that Rojan keeps writing to me about from Nepal. And I want you to say it, and then I'm going to try to answer it, because it's the tough question. And thank you for hitting it. Scott, please, you have the floor.
Yeah, the first thing is, David, I hope that you've got support from your team and WHO on this one. I don't think your line has been wavering, and all the weeks that I've been involved with this group, you have been absolutely decisive. There may have been amends and renegotiations of certain things as we found out more information throughout. However, we know that this diversionary tactic has been used by the White House and others across the world for political reasons only. Now, it seems to me, and our dear friend Richard Edelman, maybe it was probably far better to advise you on this than I am. I'm a general marketing and advertising guy. He's a PR classic. The fact of the matter is I think you have a really strong platform here. What you said yesterday has allowed us to get back into the news with the narrative. And I know that World Health Organization and you as scientists don't want to be taking on the punches and the fights and the arguments with idiots that are sat in various political seats. And I get that. However, that's costing lives. And the fact of the matter is here that what we need to do is we need to, as a community, look for all those angles, whether they be scurrilous or otherwise, to get this narrative further up the food chain within news sources, because news sources are clickbaiting and television baiting all the time. They just want viewers. They don't give a shit about COVID. All they want is people to watch and to propel their political point of view. So therefore, I do fundamentally believe that you have held fast. WHO has held fast. And actually, the narrative is very simple here. The reason lockdowns are being considered is because every other aspect of what should have been happening in the past 7 months in preparation for the so-called wave 2 has been failing, including in our own country of Canada and across Europe, and absolutely definitely in the United States and other countries. And therefore, that's the narrative that has to be played out. And so I think you've been clear, and I think that today is a really good opportunity for you and your colleagues at WHO to be absolutely decisive in saying, yes, we don't need lockdowns, but we need governments to step up. And we need contact tracing, we need testing where it needs to be, and we need community, local health support action taking place. If that is not done, and you can check through WHO and my record, then yes, you will need to go into lockdown. So don't blame WHO for the goddamn lockdown, blame yourselves. And I know that scientists and those on the right side, and sometimes we do not want to take on this, but whilst idiots like that orange thing in the White House are costing people lives on a daily basis, and those in other countries, now is our time to PR step up. And it may not be you, David, it may not be your organization, it may not be WHO, but find others in the community who will step up and will say this shit in the media on a daily basis. You have a platform, and I think you should use it. I shall now step off my soapbox and calm down.
Scott, thank you very much indeed. There is a challenge, and I'm so glad you said it. If a government doesn't get it together, if the testing strategy is messed up, if isolation is not done competently, if contact tracing is just a terrible failure, and if those absolute central planks of infectious disease control are not put in place, then it's really hard to hold these outbreaks down and to suppress them. And you do get the rapid buildup, especially if you've got population frustration with people just saying, I can't be bothered. And some of the rises in Europe that are happening at the present time and that have built up over the last 3 weeks, unfortunately reflect that combination of state failure and population frustration.
And sorry to cut across you, David, but the other thing is here, WHO itself intrinsically is under attack by the United States and its leadership. And I do think that yes, while there's this tussle between what's right to say and not to say, what role should politically WHO and others have or not, we are in a point in time when WHO is being politicized. I think from that point of view, it allows you permission to, in the world, take a political stance.
So thank you. This is a really tricky. I had a very careful discussion with the communications team at WHO this morning. It's you so badly want to fight back, and yet at the same time, our organizations are dependent on resources from some of the very countries that one could want to criticize. And I've got the words ringing in my ear, be careful, remember who pays us. So Scott, thank you for that point. And thank you for saying that probably we've just got to be political. We can't go on ducking and weaving, avoiding. Thank you, Scott. And it's very acute. And because of what happened in Washington over the last 2 weeks, it's even more so. Scott, as a PR guy, would you do it, if you were us, would you do it from the inside, or would you be looking for third parties to do most of the work?
I think that sometimes the current trend for brands and for organizations, particularly, and including those in the non-profit sector, is that consumers are now in a space where they do demand authenticity. And I think the world has shifted in that people want to find a defense, and those organizations, even if they are non-profit and meant to be apolitical, to stand up for the truth, because we are having truth dismantled in most other situations. So the game's changed. If we had stronger news media and independent news thought throughout the world, then yes, I'd be saying it needs to be done with a safety step by step. We need to remain intact with the truth. But that does not stop you from creating platforms that allow you to say the truth.
Yeah.
For example, I don't know whether it was deliberate or not. I would say it was a PR coup what you did yesterday by saying what you did, because then all of a sudden back on the news created by the White House is your platform to be able to say further and more. So it's about putting PR into its real proper capability, which is slightly more strategic ways of prodding the bear. And I think we know across the world which bears we're talking about, in order to give WHO the platform to say, let us be clear.
Yeah.
The way that the New York Times laid out the facts. But the problem is, you're not going to get those facts into the New York Times or any other news outlet unless you create the platform first.
There's no way we would have got that stuff.
No, not at all.
Happened. Yeah. Thank you very much. Robert Tyree. Robert, tell us a bit about yourself while you're introducing. You've got a number of points in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. I saw you bobbing around a bit. I can't try to work out where you are, so tell us where you are.
Hi, David. Thank you, first of all, for your work, and I appreciate your challenge. It is huge in this world. I am in Toronto, Canada, native of Canada for the last 56 years. However, in the last 20 years, I have worked in engagements in blue chip companies in the US, so 20 years of US experience. I'm more a US person who just happens to live in Toronto, Canada, and a traveler, and been impacted directly by the pandemic, not health-wise. Everyone's safe in my household. However, I think this is the biggest challenge on earth, as you do. What I bring to the table is strong marketing, strong science. I'm a computer scientist by training.
Yeah.
I build huge systems that change large-scale insurance and banking companies.
Yeah.
And we do it by the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
It literally comes down to the sentence. I know that when you say lockdown, you mean national lockdown. You mean widespread lockdown. You do not mean that if there is an outbreak on the corner in a bar and someone closes it, that lockdown should be stopped. That's a lockdown too.
I call that, that's absolutely necessary. It's strategic, absolutely.
So that messaging on widespread lockdown or just collapsing that and what that is, I wish there was a definition that the world agreed on what a lockdown was, what a lockdown of the first measure and the 10th measure was, and then we'd be having a different discussion.
Yeah, got it. Do you want to keep going on some of the other points that you raised, or we want to come back later? Robert.
Sorry, David, can I just jump in on Robert's comment there? Robert is right. Somebody needs to take control of this narrative, and the news media proved they can't. So therefore, this platform to say, for once, let us give you a dictionary WHO definition of lockdown and release that as your press release today. This is a lockdown. It means national. That's what we mean. Don't forget it. It's very simple, and just be a bit more assertive in that communication strategy. Apologies for jumping in again, but I don't think this is difficult. And I think the WHO and you, David, should be empowered to really drive this home.
Good. Robert, do you want to come in again?
Yeah, one thing that I'll just be short on this, my last point for now, maturity model. So I've developed, and in my community, we've developed these maturity models, which take a point, an item, and assess the maturity. In computing, it's famous. Carnegie Mellon did the very first one, and it was around the level of expertise in computing. I think there's a maturity model that should be developed for pandemics that show that a country is at maturity level 0 or level 5. And it's a constructed model done objectively as possible so that we can say that, oh yeah, well, in your case, Canada, you're at maturity level 3, and these are the 5 things you could do to break through to get to maturity level 4.
Wow. We have just begun once again to see whether we can develop the framework that's necessary for developing such an index, Robert. So our minds are in the same place. The team's on it. There are people on this call who are deeply stuck in it. Thank you, Robert. Just want to tell everybody, if I can get Henk Beckerdam to comment, I wouldn't mind, because he is a veteran of SARS and a veteran of COVID, and he's keeping on it. But while Henk is thinking, I'd like to go to Rebecca Cantor, who I think is in Santiago, for your comments. And by the way, there are many names I recognize today who not lit up on this. If you want to say a word, just like your video and then start waving, or better still, put a word in the chat. We will have a session before the end where we will talk about the who's on the call, and we will do a quick poll result. We'll also look at Sally's imaging from live illustration, but I want the conversation to go on now. So Rebecca, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. I just want to build off of what Scott and Robert were saying and what I was thinking about at the beginning of the session, David. I am in Santiago. I'm an American, but I think more like a Latin American. And so when I was in lockdown here in Santiago for 5 months straight, where legally I could only go outside for 2 30-minute dog walks a week within a 2-block radius, and if I didn't have a dog, it would have been 1 trip to the store a week. That's lockdown for me. When my friends and family in the United States talk about lockdown in March or April, or in other countries, everyone has a different conception of lockdown. And so it drives me crazy when people in the US are talking about lockdown. I'm like, guys have no idea what I went through even as a privileged person. And so what I started thinking about this entire time, and it builds off what Scott was saying and then Robert about authenticity and needing a dictionary. I realize now a lot of this language around lockdown, quarantine, distancing, we've talked about a lot, the problem with the wording of social distancing. All of this vocabulary was made up in February, March, when people thought COVID might be a short-term thing. But where I thought the language like that, David, you brought to the table months ago was COVID ready, but we need a whole new COVID ready dictionary. Lockdown, quarantine, social distancing are words that do not go in the COVID ready dictionary. And with that, I can't build off, support what Scott was saying enough. Take the new COVID ready dictionary and just talk it up, because the more you said COVID ready enough, that stuck with at least a bunch of us in these sessions. But the more you can think of new terminology, with that, what I wrote down, middle path vocabulary. Once we have the middle path vocabulary that you can just repeat, I don't think anyone here is going to attack you for a coup or using bad language. We just need new vocabulary and new systems, COVID ready systems thinking. We're applying old models to the new reality, for lack of better words.
Wow.
And so,
Rebecca, you've done something brilliant. The COVID ready dictionary and the middle path vocabulary. I can see friends who have been struggling with me on this, just nodding their heads. It's just beautiful. And I hope that you won't mind just
no, go for it. Unfortunately, what I have is like this, but just go for it or send me an email.
Yeah.
But just keep talking. We need the people in WHO to keep talking. That's where the whole campaign comes in. I still think we need the campaign. We just need to do it with the right words and not use the words from March or February.
Brilliant. That's Rebecca. Gosh, I'm so glad I bumped into you earlier in my life, Rebecca, and that we've stuck together. That's lovely. Robert came in backing you. He had a couple of comments. I think Twee, you might be given just a moment in a minute. I've got names here. Gawafa, I'd like to come to you. Magin, come to you. And I saw, I think you said Maurizio wanted to talk. Anyway, I lost a piece of paper. So but Twee, please, come in now. I can see you smiling. And I think, and John, if you want to come in on top, just dive in over Twee. Twee.
Thank you, David. Thank you all. I'm just going to share the results quickly of the poll that we've run so you can see who's here today and how they're all feeling. I would actually like to rerun the poll at the end of the session to see if that changes at all, but it's still very good to see most people optimistic. And some negative emotions coming through there, and to say always that the LinkedIn community chat is open for us to keep these conversations going. And one of those things I would love to keep going in the community chat is, what should we include in this dictionary? What is this vocabulary that we can build together? I feel so privileged to be have built this network with all of you. It's such a nice group we have, and full of amazing experience and insights. And I'm just so ready to go on continuing to build this. So thank you very much.
Twee, that's absolutely great. If you can get it together to run the third question again, I would love that. We need it. It really would be quite nice to see whether we've, during this less than an hour, we've shifted a bit. John, please, I wanted to give you a chance to see. Could you just answer that call? Sorry.
Yeah, just so quickly from me, David, because it sort of reinforces what others have said. But I think this conversation is so important to us, because I think we were talking earlier today about how this just feels like a moment where stuff opens up. We've been saying a lot of this stuff since March, really. The middle path is good, basic public health work, but nobody wants to hear that. They want smart apps, they want world-beating systems, they want X, Y, or Z, and you've got to do the hard yards, and you've got to do it together if you want to get the gain from it. And I think it's really encouraging to hear from people that this feels like a right moment, and that gives us a lot of confidence to keep the head above, keep the head up, and keep sort of stepping forward into the space and see what happens. I think so. Thank you.
William Nabarro, did you want to say anything, member of our team?
Yeah, thank you. I think I would endorse what everybody said. I think you need to be really specific and really precise. And if we can get sort of establish some definitions which you can hold to and use consistently, and increasingly prevail on others to use, then I think that'd be very helpful. I mean, my own view, David, is I think you were caught out slightly a few days ago just by the intensity of the political polarization which you found yourself caught in the middle of. And I think you've got to be, and as the election comes closer, I think you've just got to be really aware of how intense that polarization is going to be. And that does require real precision of language.
Thanks, William. And other members of the team, if you would like to come in at all, please just make sure I can see you. Thanks a lot. And Henk, if you feel, I just make some kind of face at me. And also, Henk, come in now, Henk, please. Henk and I, we've done too many of these things. What do you feel, Henk, about language and so on?
Thank you, David, and also John, Scott, William, and all the other speakers have been saying. I think this is a crucial part, and normally my perspective is always coming from countries like China and India, where I work. But this time, I'm feeling the frustration being in the Netherlands, where things were really good after their intelligent lockdown. They looked very good in the beginning of June. And then I think in order then to honor the middle part and move not towards lockdown, not enough work was done in the months of June, July, and August. We wasted time in Europe. And one of the things what's there, all the basic principle, what you have been mentioning, and William was also saying it again, and Scott and John, all of you said, we need to go back to the basic public health part, where you need to make sure that you do the testing, you do the contact tracing, you do the isolation care, on the contacts, etc. And even more, and I still think we need to repeat it and repeat it. This virus is so different. What is so different from the SARS, from this one? With the SARS was only spreading it when you had a fever. Now we have a high percentage, and we still don't even know the percentage. I'm frustrated about that we don't have more research even being done. We don't even, but we know that there are so many people who are either pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic who carry the virus and start spreading it. And because of that, we need to go to this one big thing in public health. Prevention is the best. So you need to do everything in that area what you can. In the Netherlands, I'm very frustrated about the discussions about the mask, which is one of those elements which I think you just have to do it. But going back in that, but then you also need to go back to, we need to invest in public health. We need to have the capacities there. We need to have the resources. In the Netherlands now, we can't even follow up anymore. The institution that needs to follow up on contact tracing was already overwhelmed in August, let alone now. And that cannot happen. We need to make sure that people, even now, because this is not a sprint, this is a marathon, even now they need to invest in public health. Right. Because we might need it while we are getting even not out of this second wave. I think it will last till February, March, or that we have a third wave. We need to continue going back to public health and investing over there.
Very important. But, that
may only one thing say, David, one thing extra, but our information system needs also to be more precise. If we want to have the middle part, you need to have sufficient detailed information, both geographical as from population groups. That will help with your measures to be then more precise.
Absolutely, Henk. I mean, I remember on that early SARS work that you were involved in, it was absolutely essential to get precision on who and where, who was being infected and where they were. Let's go to Botswana. Megan, thank you for opening up your video. I hope that you're okay. I know you're using the middle path. You've got increasing numbers of cases. The sort of thing I'd like to know is how quickly are numbers of cases doubling, who's getting ill, are the hospitals overloaded, all that sort of stuff. But it's just great to see you. And now's your moment to share anything that you've got with us. Megan. Can you unmute? If you can unmute, I can't unmute you from where I am. Can you unmute where you are?
Oh, okay. Thank you, David. I did. Hi, everyone. I can see today people are very passionate about lockdowns and temperatures are flaring. When we started, we had 2 lockdowns. The first one was 6 weeks. Then we went back to work. Then we had a 2-week lockdown. But we sort of discovered that we could actually manage contact tracing because the cases were few. Mostly people who test positive are coming from South Africa, the ones who bring food and the ones who bring petrol, fuel and everything, because we don't manufacture those. So they are not spreading because they are not allowed to visit anyone, they are being accompanied. But we have cases, in the few cases we had, we don't really know what happened, but it's now spreading. Even at our university, you find that in certain classes, you hear that 2 people tested positive. Initially, we used to barricade the building, but now they are just cleaning and we are continuing. We are using the middle path. And then non-academic staff, they've been told those who share offices are now working from 8 to 1 if their services are really necessary for them to be at work. Then they swap and someone else comes in at 1 and leaves at 7. Private companies are also trying to do the same, but there are those who have to be at work, like courts are still in operation. So lawyers have to go to court and they're not doing it virtually. but they are still practicing the testing, sanitizing and contact tracing. So it's sort of working, but the numbers are increasing. So we are a bit jittery.
Yes.
And we don't feel, for example, I haven't had a face-to-face lecture in a while, but then with Botswana, network is a problem. So we're not doing much. Yesterday, all my lectures flopped because it was raining and there was no internet services.
Oh my dear.
So that's the point that's gonna hit us a lot. If we had consistent and viable internet, we would manage somehow, but then most meetings are flopping because of all that. So I don't know what we're going to do in the future, but for now, we're just trying to go to work when necessary. So
Thank you very much
yeah,
for joining us. Stay with us. And
okay.
how difficult it is. And one of the reasons why this matters, this group that meets twice a week, is that we are here to hold on to each other. And we all need to hold on to each other. Even if we've got perfect internet and all the rest, we still need to hold on to each other. But Megan, we're here for you. And we're so pleased that you joined us. Stay in touch, okay?
Thank you, David.
Wonderful. Let's go to Maurizio. Maurizio, I don't know where you are. Tell us a bit where you are physically, and it's always great to hear from you. You have the floor.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. I'm still at home in the Costa del Sol, in the Mediterranean coast of Spain. I wanted to remember, I'm sure that you'd remember this, David, because when we had the Commission for Social Communication and Community Mobilization in West Africa, it was very clear that lockdown meant one thing and confinement meant another. And obviously, lockdown is a widespread lockdown, period. Everybody goes home, stays home. And confinement was the term used for a neighborhood, typically, where certain positive cases have been identified. And it was very clear. One thing meant one thing and the other meant the other. So that's point number one. I say this for our future work in the dictionary, because obviously, in the vocabulary, I think we need to reinvent that. It was very clear then, lockdown and confinement. The other thing is, I had put a little note, and this has to do with narratives. At the beginning of the chat, I had put a little note because I was struck by these statements back on 5th of October about approximately 10% of the human global population possibly being infected with COVID by Mike Ryan. And obviously, this means that an estimated 780 million people might have been infected with COVID, of which only about 5% have been confirmed by PCR. And obviously, the dance of numbers is very misleading, and it misleads what? It misleads social narrative, and social narrative is what drives herd behavior, among other things. And I think that it is opportune for us to keep this in mind, because I think that politicians are also playing around with all of us, or trying to, with these numbers. And this focus on the PCR confirmed tests is a completely fallacious way of going about this. Okay. If we agree that indeed a much larger cohort of the human global population might be infected, that's a different ball game altogether. And we better prepare not only psychologically for it, but epidemiologically for it. Our devices and the systems and whatever else we put together as possible solutions need to be adjusted to scale. We are telling ourselves lies if we say, oh, okay, that's no problem. There's 37 million people. Well, if actually there's 700 or 780 million people who have been infected by COVID, well, it's a different monster altogether, and we better be prepared for that fact. Anyway, I wanted to mention this because that really had me going all this week. I've been looking and studying a little bit about herd behavior and trying to get the lessons from our psychologist friends and so on. I'm very, very concerned about this. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Maurizio. Thank you for reminding us just how important it is to get words, then narratives, then connections, as right as we can make them. And I was listening particularly when you said, you haven't just been looking at this stuff on your own, you've been connecting with other people. And let's keep working together on this. From our point of view, this is really important. And suddenly, as my brother said, well, I have been caught by surprise. I really have. Thank you. Let's go to Lola. I don't know how good your internet is, Lola, but you're going to talk to us about your view of risk communication, what matters. If you'd just like to say where you are, and if you're still on, there I can see you. If you'd like to unmute and talk to us, you could do so now. If you can't, I'll move on and I'll come back to you later. Lola.
Okay, hello.
Yeah, wonderful.
Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Good. Oh, hi everyone. But this is really interesting, and I'm so glad that David is passionate. But what I want to suggest is, because I can't remember the person that said that he is going to be caught in the middle of a lot of political discussions. So he just has to stand his ground. Yes, these are the people that are funding you. But what I found out in my research is that a lot of people are losing trust in the WHO. And the reason why is because you're not standing your ground. There's this Yoruba adage, it says that just because you're paying me, don't make me your servant, you know? So you have to stand your ground. And you have to, because another part of the issue is the timeline. If you look at the timeline that has been archived by the WHO, Donald Trump is using that as a political tool and analyzing it as half news. Because if he says, oh, this is the truth, this is the truth, you can find it on the website, you can find it, I'm telling the truth. So now that information is archived, yeah, this new information has to be reiterated constantly. And I said in the chat that it has to be like a PR kind of communication, so yeah, that when people get it, they understand. Yeah. They know that I don't know what brands you use in the UK, but we use Lux, and Lux has been since I was born. But now there's a new Lux, and it's the same Lux when you open the the bar soap, but the advertising is not the same as when I was a child. So right, I think that format is what the WHO has to adopt and just move fast on communication. They have to spend much time and strategy and money on communication now, because a lot of people are losing trust, and the WHO is very, very important.
Thank you.
So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. I was going to make a crack there.
Yes.
A joke, but actually what you said was so serious, I have suppressed my joke. And I thank you very much for saying that. Stay in touch. Honestly, it's so helpful. These are kind of coming in right, these comments. Beautiful. I was going to go to Yusuf and then Gawahar. Yusuf, please. A quick comment, if you can.
I think that people have made very, very important points. And one thing that should be pointed out is that the language and the measures adopted at the beginning of the pandemic were improvisational. They were created, borrowed from other disciplines. For example, lockdown, I think, is a security term. In fact, I think it's a penal term. It comes from, you lock down a jail, you lock down a prison population. And this is something that we're in for the long run. And we have to take back the narrative. And that narrative, as Scott, Robert, and other people have said during today's conversation, has to match reality. The reality in terms of what needs to be done.
Yeah.
You're going to be misunderstood by opportunists no matter what you say.
Yeah.
can do is speak truth, and speak the truth about what needs to be done. And what needs to be done is taking what we now have is a more diverse spectrum of tools that where hard power represented by lockdowns is an extreme, and is an extreme that's adopted at this point only in the face of failure. And unfortunately, most of the governments, at least in the North, have failed.
Yeah.
But there's a whole there's a whole spectrum of soft power, which is selective, temporary closures, isolation mechanisms. The language has to change to reflect the measures that are necessary, and adopting all sorts of things that please us for sound bites and populists.
Good. Thank you very much, Yusuf. That's very straight and very helpful. And also you're in the midst of quite a lot of attention. I'm going to ask one more person to speak, and then just look at the form while it's up, because we're really after your mood. That is an effort to try to see whether moods change. Gawaha Atif, please. And just before
Always a pleasure to hear you. You've given us in the world tremendous leadership over the years in every possible crisis. I have to admit, I wasn't aware of the negative press you received and WHO received in the last 24 hours. I was very pleased to hear the end of the week when you said lockdowns aren't the answer. I think, well, clearly, let's talk about the media here. And I'm not as an expert as perhaps Scott and others are here, other than from the work that we've done together, David, and in other areas. The technical information, certainly the dictionary mentioned by Rebecca, is extraordinary. This is what we need. We need that at the provincial level here in Canada, especially in Quebec. We're missing the mark. We're reactive and not proactive.
Okay.
And I think the more information, they need help. They need help. They need help. They're getting help in the financial sense from the federal government, but they're not planning. We've known we're going to have a second wave, or call it what you like, for months, and not enough was done. We're refusing to admit the schools are an issue and how to handle it. We're doing it piecemeal. It is problematic. And so that kind of technical support to come in a very forthright, direct, almost aggressive way, but in a positive sense, is extremely important for governments that are trying, but they're missing the mark. They have the resources, but they keep missing the mark. We're turning into a tent city in Montreal. Okay. There's so many homeless out there. And all I can do to support through the different nonprofits that I'm involved with here is to give charity. That's not long term. That's just a short term. And as for your political foes, well,
thank you. So I'm going to have to stop us now.
Oh, okay. All right. No, I'll stop. Thank you again.
Yeah. No, but two things. I have to stop because we've got something to do with World Food Week coming up in 1 minute. Gawaha, I wanted to stop you because you used to work for the World Food Programme, and I remember you fondly when you were there. And I just wanted to use this moment to say how totally overjoyed I am with the news on Friday. The World Food Programme is the most extraordinary international operation that really does stop hundreds of thousands, and in some cases millions of people, from becoming hungry, malnourished, and dying because of shortage of food. And Gawaha was in the middle of that organization, but I've been wanting, wherever possible, and I don't very often get it, to just say, it's so good that you got the Nobel Peace Prize. Really right and good.
Thank you, David.
For anything else that you'd like to say? And then we go to Sally and we stop. Tweet.
Thank you so much. Just to say that we have more people being optimist and enthusiastic, and those who selected discouraged or rage or hatred, there are no longer anyone selecting that as their emotions now. So I would take that as a positive. And I feel very good and energized about what to do next. So thank you all.
A non-controlled experiment. Thank you, Twee. Sally, please, could you show us your screen? Sally? Ah, there we go. And Sally, just 10 seconds on how you felt while doing this.
Hi everybody, it's my first session scribing with you, so thank you very much for having me. It's fascinating. I listened into your talk last week and I just find that I find it very empowering to listen to.
Oh.
And I definitely feel glum at the beginning, but positive afterwards. It's just very encouraging to know that there are people speaking the truth and being proactive. So I hope you appreciate my picture of Donald.
Thank you very much for the picture, which is lovely. I love the flying. Thank you, everybody. I just want to say goodbye. The reason for rush is that I really do have to do the next thing. Thank you all for joining. We'll bring you up if you join again, either on Friday or this time next week. It's quite a roller coaster, and look forward to seeing you again. To everybody, bye-bye. Stay well, stay safe, stay strong. Bye all. Bye particularly to my daughter, Polly. Hello to Nichols' family. Bye-bye to you. Bye. Hello, Terry. Nice to see you.
Bye, Dad.
Hello.
Can't work the video.
All right. You got no vid. Love to you, Polly, and to the kids, and love to Kristen. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
That's right. Good boy.